On the third day after Mr. Ba's first love came back, she and Mr. Ba fought over a plate of fried rice I made. I was on the sidelines. Don't fight, don't fight. They looked at me with the ferocity in their eyes that wanted to kill each other, and they both asked, "Do you love me or him, her, me?" Did these two go to the wrong set? I'm just a little stand-in. After graduating from university, I couldn't find a job, so I sold lunch boxes at a construction site, 2 vegetables and 1 meat, 10 yuan a piece, a large amount of full. Just when my lunchbox business was booming, a person with, "I am a domineering president," written on his face came to me and said that he wanted to support me, because I have 7 points of resemblance to his first love. I trembled and put down the big scoop in my hand, and wiped the tears of excitement from the corners of my eyes. It's finally my turn to be rich. Thanks to my parents for giving me this face. The money is really bright. 3 years later, Mr. Ba's first love returned to China. When I received the call from Mr. Ba, I was eating watermelon with the air conditioner blowing. Mr. Ba was at a loss on the other end of the phone. "Flora Mall has returned to China. You go to the hotel for a few days, and the driver will be there in a while. Don't think about it. I'm not trying to abandon you. I just don't know how to explain our relationship to her. The day has finally come. Flora Mall is the first love that the boss hides in the bottom of his heart, and I am the stand-in for him to spend his wallet. Now that the genuine product is back, I am a shoddy counterfeit and shoddy imitation, and it is only natural that I should give way to it." I put down the spoon in my hand, and hurriedly express my loyalty to the boss. "Don't worry, I'll pack my things now, and I won't expose our relationship." The boss was silent for a long time, and then he asked me tentatively, "Sybil Walker, are you willing to part with me? Would you be sad if you were separated from me?" "How can I be sad? It's too late to be happy for you. I wish you and Miss Flora Mall 100 years of happiness in advance," I replied sincerely. "As a stand-in, you should recognize your identity, and you must not have the idea of overstepping your bounds. What's more, the long-planned retirement life can finally be put on the agenda, thanks to this job, which has more money and less worry. I am at least 30 years ahead of my peers." Mr. Ball was very dissatisfied with my answer. "Don't you have a little reluctance to me? Not sad at all? Don't you want to stay with me at all?" There was a palpable mixture of exasperation and a hint of subtle grievance in his tone. "Alas, how can a person like me be worthy of you? You are the moon in the sky, and the judgment between me and you is like mud. How dare you ask for something that does not belong to you?" I sighed and whispered as I feigned sadness. "How can I behave so freely as a person like Mr. Ba, who regards face as life? It is simply an insult to Mr. Ba's personal charm. First improve the identity of the boss, and then show that you are safe and self-contained. This is a standard high emotional intelligence speech template." Mr. Ba was really satisfied, and his tone of voice became brisk. "Don't look down on yourself so much. You should be brave enough to express your true thoughts. Maybe there will be an accident." His tone was suggestively elongated. "Yes, can I say, I clutched my phone, hesitating. "Say it, speak it bravely, as long as you are sincere." "I can't agree," Mr. Ba encouraged softly. "What is true in the heart, after all?" I couldn't hold back and plucked up the courage. "You see, now that Miss Flora Mall has returned to China, our contract is about to expire. When will the balance be paid to me?" There was an instant silence on the other end of the phone. After a while, Mr. Ba sneered, "It's broken, so I won't be angry." The heart of the boss is really a needle under the sea. I tried to make up. "I'm not in a hurry to ask for money. You have a lot of money. How can you have less money for me?" "I am just remind you." Mr. Ba didn't speak. "You're angry?" I pursed my lips and asked cautiously. Mr. Ba snorted heavily and hung up the phone. I was shocked. I don't really have to pay for it, regardless of whether Ba always wants to repay the debt. The ending of my exit is already a certainty. Just as I was packing my luggage, and thinking about whether to go to the south to experience the small bridges and flowing water first, or to go to the north first to enjoy the scenery of the north, the doorbell suddenly rang. I thought it was the driver who arrived, but when I opened the door, I saw a woman panting and pulling luggage. She glanced at me, exhaled with relief, and muttered quietly, "It's good to catch up." I knew I had finished that bowl of fried rice, and I blamed that life-urging ghost. We look 7 points alike. I recognized her identity at a glance. Flora Malle breathed steadily, straightened up, and assumed a haughty posture. She looked me up and down, her eyes finally focused on my face. Andre Baker and I are childhood sweethearts, who grew up together, and the relationship is very close. I haven't seen you before going abroad, are you? I don't know if it's my delusion. The words, growing up together, childhood sweethearts, and intimacy are very heavy in her tone, as if she is deliberately emphasizing. Could it be that Flora Malle also likes Andre Baker, and the two of them are actually secretly in love with each other? I suddenly made up a sadomasochistic novel, with 180 chapters in my head. After the crush of Qingmai went abroad to study, Zuma was a stand-in for the solution of lovesickness, and Qingmai returned to China many years later, but found that Zuma, who grew up with him, already had someone else around her. She was sad and wanted to save her love, but the third party repeatedly deliberately blocked it. The two misunderstood and inseparable. She ran away from him to chase her wings and could not fly, and the role I play in it is the third party, that makes countless readers hate and gnash their teeth. I decided to disguise myself on the spot, and even if I was discovered, I would not admit it. I'm a maid hired by Andre Baker. I smiled. She looked at me suspiciously and said, "Really? How can a servant look so much like me? You can't be lying and deliberately hiding your true identity." Flora Malle, who is worthy of being the boss, is simply sharp, and frighteningly intelligent. A layer of cold sweat broke out on my back instantly, and I could only pretend to be calm on my face. Andre Baker has a bad stomach and hired me to cook, and it looks like me. Miss, you have a fate. As soon as the words fell, Flora Malle's eyes lit up a little. You know how to cook. Ahem, cough cough. I mean, what fate is not fate? Don't think that such a false lie can fool me. That you can make fried rice. Is your fried rice delicious? It's hard to say about fate. The teacher taught us not to lie since I was a child, although I basically don't listen to the teacher. The more I talked, the more empty I became, and my voice gradually lowered. But fried rice, I can make fried rice. The craftsmanship is first class. Andre Baker wants to eat 3 bowls in a row. Although it is not known why Flora Malle suddenly changed the subject, but I realized that this was an opportunity. I'm not lying this time. My family runs a small restaurant, and cooking is my family heritage. Otherwise I wouldn't have found a job, and would have gone to the construction site to sell boxed lunches. Flora Malle's eyes flickered as she lowered her head and muttered, "If you continue after eating, you shouldn't be able to delay anything." I ate a few bites of that fried rice just now, and I didn't have time to savor it. God knows how big a shadow the pebble fried rice outside left on me. Her voice was so low that I didn't hear it clearly. I saw her look down and talk to herself for a moment, then look up at me with a determined gaze, as if she had made some kind of determination. She grabbed me by the arm and rushed through the door, and pushed me into the kitchen. "We'll talk about your identity later. I beg you, make me a fried rice first. I've been thinking about it for several years. Put more eggs, add ham sausages, and old godmothers. No coriander, no green onions. Please, you're a great man." I don't dare to slack off. Judging by the current situation, she and I can be regarded as the relationship between the future boss lady and the underground employees. I cut the intestines and beat the eggs, turned on the gas, and picked up the wok. 10 minutes later, a large pot of golden fried rice comes out of the pan. In order to be worthy of the noble status of the boss first love, I pulled out a white plate with a relatively high style from the cupboard, filled the bowl with rice and then turned it upside down into the plate. If it's Michelin, it's at least 1999. I underestimated the combat effectiveness of a returning son. In less than 3 minutes, the plate was empty and clean as new. She stared at me. "Anything else?" Her eyes sparkled with expectation. I went back to the kitchen in silence. She just wants fried rice. What's wrong with her? A hungry stray cat, shuttling through the streets to find food, rummaging through the trash cans to eat a little scraps of cold rice, finally eating a little fresh cat food, not full, with big round eyes looking at the kind people who gave her food expectantly, meowing pitifully. Chooch's pitiful appearance suddenly pierced my heart. Can I not be satisfied? I held up the wok and spoonful by spoonful to add rice to her. Enough, kid. Not enough. Not enough for me to jump into the pot. Flora Mall burst into tears. And at the end, she picked up the wok and showed off. Fried rice is so delicious. I want to eat fried rice. It's delicious. Andre Baker is living a fairy life. He is not satisfied. Fried rice is so delicious. Under my loving gaze, Flora Mall finished the whole pot of fried rice. This pot of fried rice can hold about 7 or 8 bowls, which is the amount of 2 meals. Flora Mall touched her round belly contentedly. That's the right way to live. I don't want to endure the life I used to live without enough to eat, hungry and starving. Long eyelashes obscured a flash of contemplation under her eyes. Just when I thought that everything was going well, the stray cat suddenly turned its face, and showed its sharp claws at me again. No matter how much you try to hide it, your appearance is here, and you don't dress like a servant. I can guess who you are. My heart rose to my throat at once. Flora Mall got up and pressed closer to me. Why are you hiding your identity? Do you like him? Do you know how to cook anything other than fried rice? She is forward, I am backward, until I was cornered and there was no way back. Leaning against the wall, Flora Mall's warm breath sprayed on my face, and she propped one hand against the wall, trapping me firmly. My heart beat faster. Of course, it was scared. She slowly approached, and in a low voice she commanded, "Answer my question." I was overwhelmed by her momentum, and the plan to conceal my identity was bankrupt before it could be implemented. It's not that we don't fight, it's that the enemy is too strong. I stammered. I concealed my identity because I was afraid that you would have a misunderstanding. Andre Baker, he didn't like me. He only liked you. I didn't like him. I would have a lot. Home cooking would. Flora Mall smiled with satisfaction. He's sick and stupid. I guess you don't like him. So let's do it. What if you abandon him and me? I love the food you cook. Me, hey. At this moment, there was a noise at the door. Andre Baker rushed back and saw his first love, and Stanton ambiguously leaning together, and let out a sharp pop. What are you two doing? Separate me. I stood in front of the couch with Andre Baker crossed his arms, and stared at me with death. Flora Mall used the excuse that she was tired from the long journey, so she had already slipped into her guest room and fled. I reassure Andre Baker that Flora Mall and I are innocent, and have no adultery. He finally reluctantly believed it. I glanced at Flora Mall's closed door, and muffled my voice. There's one thing I think it's important for you to know. Miss Flora Mall has discovered my identity, and I don't think I need to leave tonight. When it comes to chasing his wife, Mr. Ba is really anxious. If you find out, you will find that the contract has not expired yet. Whatever you go, you just stay here. What you should do. Okay, then I'll quickly pack up my things. Immediately. What? Stay here. I reacted to something was wrong, and looked at him in shock. Didn't you let me go to the hotel this afternoon? And Miss Flora Mall is back, and we have that kind of relationship, so it's not appropriate for me to continue to stay here. Can't I change my mind? What's wrong? Our relationship is very ugly. Andre Baker somehow suddenly blew up, shouting at the top of his voice. I glanced at the door and hated that iron was not made of steel. Whisper, are these glorious? The boss changed his order and said one thing at a time, and I can't make sense no matter how I say it. I hatefully thought that he deserved to chase his wife to the crematorium in the future. It's me who is shallow. Andre Baker won't let me go, just because I'm part of their play. In the morning, I sat in the living room and watched the drama. Andre Baker and Flora Mall stood in front of the window, leaning together in the glare of the sun, and reminiscing about their good past. Their voices were not low, and I listened curiously for a while. Andre Baker, the sun is so big today. Do you remember? When I used to run in high school, the sun was so big. I thought to myself, it's 39 degrees today. Isn't there a lot of solar energy? Of course I do. I remember every time you finished your run, you were sweating profusely. I thought to myself, 39 degrees Celsius. Not only am I sweating profusely, but I can also faint on the spot. The topics discussed are not as sticky as they should be in the ambiguous period, and the back is more and more like old classmates, who haven't seen each other for a long time. And it is a little weird. Is it true that the secretary said that I have been a little handsome recently? Of course it's true. Vomit. I'm sorry. I was a little sick to my stomach when I didn't eat in the morning. I'm a few more people on the city's rich list. And I earned so much money. And I will spend it all for my girlfriend in the future. Wow. You are so powerful. In the future, we will live a good life better than anything else. When will we be able to pierce the window paper together after chatting like this? I am anxious for them. I turn my attention back to the TV. Unexpectedly, they became louder and louder, as if they were afraid that I would not be able to hear and seriously interfere with my follow-up. I couldn't take it anymore, glanced at the time, turned off the TV, and slipped into the kitchen to shut the door and block out their voices. It didn't take long for Andre Baker to come in, running so fast. Seeing me so close to Flora Mall, I feel uncomfortable. Isn't it envious? Jealous? Found out that I am good. People like me have to rely on robbery. He glanced at me. The face is 3 points dark, 2 points proud, and 5 points, don't hurry up and know the goods. Only people like me are suitable to be boyfriends, not to mention handsome and golden, and abs, super good for girlfriends. And I don't know who will be cheaper in the end. He came in with the door unclosed, and spoke so loudly that Flora Mall could hear it clearly as she sat in the living room. Me. What was he doing? It's not enough to keep me. And you deliberately said these misleading things to me? I really don't want a wife. Do you have to misunderstand Flora Mall? Do bosses like to eat without bitterness? The boss frowned and said, why don't you speak? I was expressionless and said, whoa, Andre Baker, you are so good. Miss Flora Mall is so blessed. You are simply fairy love. Mr. Baz's face turned cold, glared at me fiercely, left a sentence of, you're just a fool, and then slammed the door and left. Call me a nerd. I'm saving your love. You know, I didn't see Flora Mall's ears standing so high. Your wife listening to us. It's annoying to go to work. I continued to prepare the ingredients. After a while, Flora Mall came in again. She closed the door tightly, touched it obscenely, and asked quietly, what I told you yesterday, have you thought about it? You see that he was chatting with me so intimately just now, completely ignoring your feelings, and you don't like him either. Kick him with me. If I was horrified to hear these words at first yesterday, I now have full insight into her purpose. She didn't hesitate to slander the image of the bamboo horse, and used herself as bait to keep me away from Andre Baker, which was a terrible idea that some clever little brain came up with. I don't have any interest in Andre Baker. I didn't like it before, and now that the owner is back, I want to go. And when the contract is over, I'm sure to run faster than anyone else. There was no sadness or joy on my face, and I said, thank you, Miss Flora Mall, for your kindness. Why, could it be that you really found that there was a little bit of liking him in your heart, and you really let that dead dog guess correctly? Flora Mall swallowed the words of the second half. And now that they were revealed, Andre Baker could kill her. She grabbed my arm, her eyebrows raised. I sighed deeply. It's really tiring. There is a feeling of exhaustion from an 80-year-old lady who picked up 20 loads of water to water the ground against the sun, and it turned out to be someone else's land. I don't want to explain. There's no why. I just don't want to. Flora Mall gritted her teeth and said, I'm not going to give up. Then he turned and walked away. When I left, I also walked a few slices of braised beef that I had cut. There is often no worse way things go but only worse. At the dinner table, Flora Mall frantically pulled rice into her mouth, and I saw that she was so pitiful that she leaned the dishes against her. Mr. Ba frowned when he saw my actions. I didn't find out who made him himself not please his wife. I only made 4 braised chicken thighs, and after one for each person, there was only one left on the plate. Flora Mall and Andre Baker stretched out their chopsticks and clamped them at the same time, and sparks sparked between them. I bowed my head and ate quietly, not wanting to get involved in the flirting between them. Andre Baker's chopsticks caught the drumsticks, and Flora Mall couldn't retract them, glaring at him in annoyance. The corners of his mouth lifted and he glanced smugly at Flora Mall. Flora Mall's face twisted in anger. I shook my head to myself. there is a long way to go to chase his wife. This kind of careful thinking, that deliberately attracts attention is just for elementary school students. And no little girl will like a little boy, who deliberately pulls her hair and messes up her braided pigtails, and pulls her scalp painfully. I want to be a ball of air, but reality doesn't follow my wishes. Flora Malle turned to me pitifully, tears in her eyes. Woo woo, I want to eat chicken legs, not to be outdone. Andre Baker also held his throat. Woo woo, I got it first. I want to eat chicken thighs too. I was so sick that I almost threw up the food I had just eaten. Flora Malle's tears fell as soon as she said it, and her tone was endearing. When I was abroad in the past, I couldn't eat enough for every meal. My stomach was hungry at night, and I woke up hungry in the middle of the night, and sent a video to relieve my inner pain. But the comment area was full of barbecue, hot pot barbecue and various delicacies, which made me even more hungry, and I even wanted to roast and eat the spider crawling out from behind the curtain. The tragic experience is really sad for those who hear it, and tears for those who hear it. I couldn't resist the pitiful onslaught of stray cats with tears in their eyes. She just wants to eat chicken legs. What's wrong with her? I was like an eccentric shovel officer, snatching the chicken leg from the unbelievable gaze of my own stupid dog, and putting it in the bowl of a stray cat. Child, eat hard. If you want to eat, I'll give you 10 more stews tomorrow. Flora Malle munched on the chicken leg and muttered, 10 braised chickens. 10 of them. I love chicken thighs. I still want to eat fried rice. Put more eggs. Add ham sausages. Add old godmothers. No coriander and no green onions. I lovingly touched her head and said, satisfied. Must be satisfied. Whatever you want to eat. Andre Baker tugged at his lips and said, "Ha, you're so sweet. I've knocked you both a little bit." I stole the limelight from Andre Baker again. But I don't blame me. Who made him treat his wife so badly? If he continues like this, if he doesn't chase his wife for 200 chapters, the reader will sentence him to prison without a wife. In order to satisfy the huge stomach of stray cats, I marinated 10 chicken legs, and made a big pot of fried rice, plus a large table of dishes. I clapped my hands and hooked the corners of my mouth lightly. This time I will make sure that I have enough to eat. Flora Malle is picking up fried rice in her mouth bowl after bowl, and Andre Baker is also desperately picking up rice, as if he has to compete with her. Could it be that the script of the two is happy enemies? I, an outsider, can't experience the fun between them? Not understanding but respecting, they stared at each other fiercely, and the posture of chopping rice seemed to be tearing at each other's flesh. The scene was so shocking that I couldn't care about anything else, so I could only keep serving food to the two of us. One more bowl. The two voices sounded at the same time, and the moment they looked at each other, the air seemed to sound the sound of gunfire, between the two armies fighting. They looked at me with burning eyes. I looked at the two bowls that stretched out, and then at the only bowl of fried rice left in the pot, and fell into deep thought. The worst fears have happened. To be fair, I decided to half a bowl for one person. I took Flora Malle's bowl first, and Andre Baker snorted. Calling you back was the biggest mistake I made. I clenched my little handkerchief helplessly. Holy, you finally realized. Why should the love of two people have the name of a third person? I should have left a long time ago, and I don't blame you for this situation. Flora Malle said what was in my heart. If you know it's your fault, don't blame others. Just take it yourself. I handed Flora Malle half a bowl of rice, and she looked at the bowl and then at the remaining fried rice in the pot, and was not angry. I want to eat a full bowl of fried rice, not half a bowl. I haven't eaten yet. I looked at me and there was another one waiting next to me. Flora Malle glanced at Andre Baker's gloomy face. Some people, who are tall and big, don't have to compete with me, a person who has just returned from abroad and can't eat all day. Andre Baker couldn't bear it. Who's stealing Hom's food? Please figure it out. Don't go too far. Flora Malle replied. It's just half a bowl of fried rice. Stingy. Andre Baker was so angry that his teeth were clucking. Yesterday I robbed my braised chicken legs, and today I want to snatch my fried rice. If you want to be ashamed, that's mine. Flora Malle snorted disdainfully. Can my face be eaten as food? I'm going to grab it. I'm not just going to grab it. Two adults, who are almost 30 years old, Fight over a bowl of fried rice like kindergarten children grabbing toys, pulling each other's hair. The alliance is in jeopardy. I was at a loss. Don't fight, don't fight. They looked at me with a ferocity in their eyes that wanted to kill each other, and they both asked, "Do you love me or he, her?" I ripped off 3 black lines above my head. Did these 2 people go on the wrong set? They didn't give up. Sybil Walker, tell me who this bowl of fried rice is for. I blew it up too. I don't eat such a big table of dishes, but I want to grab this bowl of fried rice. Right. I rushed into the kitchen like a cannonball, lit the fire, danced with a shovel, and stir-fried a large pot full of fried rice. I stomped the wok on the table, shoveling into the faces of the 2 who were still pulling each other's hair. Don't you want to eat fried rice? You eat this pot of fried rice hard, and there are no dishes left on this table. There are not so many bear children. Where are the bear parents? I put down the cruel words, and went upstairs to chase the drama. The 2 of them continued to fight, and the tool man also has a temper. I don't know what the follow-up will be, and by the time I went downstairs after watching 2 episodes, the restaurant was empty. I sighed. Bear with me. This day is still half a month away. In the dark of night, Andre Baker suddenly appeared in front of my bed with Flora Mall in his arms. Flora Mall has a sweet smile on her face, and opens her mouth without mercy. Sybil Walker, Andre Baker has already told me, it was because you deliberately seduced us that we misunderstood each other, and now that we are together, you should quickly pack up your things and get out. I scrambled to get up and pack my bags. At this time, 2 big men who came out of nowhere picked me up, and threw me out the door. Andre Baker looked at me condescendingly. Who do you think you dare to like me? Flora Mall sticks to him, and taunts me for being self-conscious. I clutched my head and tried to flee, and the sky echoed with a miserable cry for help. Help! Help! I was shocked from the nightmare, and before I had time to rejoice, it was just a dream. Then I heard a feeble knock at the door, and said, Sybil Walker, help, Moga, something happened. I hurriedly opened the door and saw Flora Mall, lying on the ground clutching her stomach, cold sweat pouring out of her forehead. I helped her against the wall and asked, what's going on? What's wrong with my stomach? She opened her mouth and said nothing. At this point, Andre Baker also crawled out of the next room, and he limply reached out to me. Sybil Walker, call an ambulance. The ambulance drove to the hospital. Flora Mall trembled and grabbed my hand. Sybil Walker, if I can't do it, you must bring me a bowl of fried rice, when you worship me this year today. I'm speechless. Don't think about fried rice at this time. Not to be outdone, Andre Baker grabbed the corner of my coat, his lips open and closed, and he didn't say a word. I wiped the cold sweat from his forehead. Don't be competitive at this time. After the doctor diagnosed that they had simply eaten too much, the 2 were dragged to induce vomiting. I patted the back one by one and counted down these 2 unconscious bear children, that pot of fried rice, and that big table of dishes. Won't you all eat them? What I'm saying is angry. Can't you hear this? To this day, the 2 still endure blaming each other. Vomit. Blame Andre Baker for this stupid dog. He has to fight with me for that bowl of fried rice. Vomit. He told me that nothing will happen. Vomit. Shut up. Vomit. When I'm all right, the first thing I'll do is sweep you out of the house. Vomit. I slapped them on the back angrily. All right, you 2 should be honest with me. The 2 of them all in unison. Gross. I let out a heavy breath, physically and mentally exhausted. What's going on? After the 2 of them vomited, and observed that there were no major problems, I carried the back of their neck skin home to recuperate. After all, it's not good to stay in the hospital all the time and waste medical resources. According to the doctor's advice, the 2 of them can't eat sweet and greasy foods recently. I boiled a pot of millet porridge, and boiled out a thick layer of rice oil to nourish their stomachs. Flora Mall looked at the porridge aggrievedly, squeezed out 2 tears, and said, woo woo woo, I don't want to drink porridge. I want to eat meat. This time, my heart was as cold as a stone at -80 degrees Celsius in winter, and the terror offensive did not do anything for me. I haven't had any meat to eat in the past few days, so you can drink porridge honestly. Flora Mall fell onto the bed with a whimper. After a while, she got up strong and looked at me affectionately. Sybil Walker, when I'm well, Andre Baker is determined to drive me away. You come with me, live with that fool every day, and live for years less. He won't drive you away." All he said in the hospital was angry. "And if he drove you away, he really didn't get old." Before I could finish my sentence, I saw Florimel looking at the door in horror. Andre Baker stood there with a grim face, his eyes red as he was about to burst into flames. "Yes, I knew that Sybil Walker would come to see you first, and when I came to see it, there was a surprise that you dared to instigate Sybil Walker to leave me." Florimel knew she was wrong, and pulled on the quilt and hid in the quilt and shivered. "It's over. I can't wait for me to heal, and I'm going to be swept out of the house now. Don't play dead for me. It's useless." Andre Baker strode forward and lifted Florimel's quilt away. "I was afraid that this battle would affect me, so I hurriedly avoided the corner. I'll just say you're being too attentive to Sybil Walker, and you've been stealing her food from me." Andre Baker gritted his teeth. "I should have guessed that you wanted to steal more than just food. You wicked woman. Don't forget what I called you back for. Now you're digging at the foot of my wall." Florimel jumped up from the bed with a burst of thought, a bit like a broken jar. "I'm just going to grab it. Since I dare to do it, I dare to admit it. Sybil Walker's cooking is so delicious, and people are both kind and gentle. It's normal for me to rob." The alliance between the two completely collapsed, and they were emotionally irrational, exposing and scolding each other. From the flirtat in the past few days, to the various troubles of the other party during school, and finally to the moral character of the other party. In the end, the two were out of breath and coughing. Florimel is eloquent and has a clear advantage. Andre Baker was furious and delivered the fatal blow. "No wonder you can't finish studying abroad until now. If I were a teacher, I would have fired you. You idiot." It was a poke in Florimel's lungs, and she blew it up. "What about you? How much better are you than me? Like Sybil Walker, but don't dare to confess. Call me to stimulate her, and say how handsome and golden. Sybil Walker has long been in love with you, but he doesn't dare to confess. But people don't like you at all. If I were you, I would have thrown myself into the river a long time ago. You coward." As soon as the words fell, the room fell silent for a moment, and the air seemed to have condensed. I cowered in the corner, my head buzzing, froze. Actually, I already knew something was wrong. When Florimel first came back, she could barely pretend to be Andre Baker, and she looked like she wanted to strangle each other. Andre Baker and Florimel were also stiff and rigid when they leaned together. If he were an actor, the performance course would have been a duck's egg. The way they get along with each other can't see any relationship between men and women at all. Even if they are happy enemies, then they can't only be enemies. There is no joy. It's just that. Even if I found the clue, I didn't dare to continue to think about it. I'm afraid that all this is my own passion, and the scene in the dream will play out in reality. When Florimel said those words in a hurry, she realized that something was wrong, and the silence made her dare not even continue to scold Andre Baker, and fell directly on the bed and covered the quilt and pretended to be dead. Andre Baker's pupils fluttered violently after Florimel poked everything. The angry expression on his face instantly turned blank, and the whole person seemed to have been hit with a slap and couldn't move. He froze in place for a long time, before he seemed to regain control of his body, and he didn't dare to turn his head to see my reaction, and stumbled away. I settled in the corner and left the room in silence with the unfinished millet porridge. That night, my thoughts were so busy that I couldn't sleep for a long time. Florimel's room was empty, and her luggage was missing. I can't even speculate on whether she escaped overnight, or was chased away by Andre Baker. What lies ahead of me is even more urgent. Andre Baker stopped in front of me, his voice hoarse, and said, "Sybil Walker, can we talk?" He and I sat on either side of the table. His face was haggard, and he had big dark circles under his eyes, and it was obvious that he hadn't slept well last night. "Sybil Walker, you heard it all yesterday, didn't you?" I nodded. He tugged at the corners of his mouth, wanting to laugh but couldn't. "Florimel is right. I like you, but I don't dare to confess. I'm afraid that you will refuse. I really don't know what to do. So I consulted a secretary who is very experienced in love. She swore that after 3 years of getting along, I was so good that you must have liked me too. And I heard that Happy was dying, and continued to ask her what to do. and the secretary proposed to bring Florimel back to stimulate you, so that you would realize your feelings for me. I believe her nonsense. Now I find that this is simply the stupidest way in the world, and I am also the stupidest person in the world when I easily believe and implement this method. I should have made my heart known to you sooner. I like you. I like that very much. I want to be with you all the time. Sybil Walker. What about you? Do you like me? After saying that, he looked at me seriously. In the eyes, there is expectation, anxiety, and love. Instead of answering his question, I asked, "Are you sure you liked me? Didn't you keep me because I looked like Florimel, and was a stand-in for her? Are you so easy to empathize with and say goodbye?" Andre Baker panicked and began to explain in a mess. I didn't like Florimel at all. It was all a misunderstanding. I fell in love with you at first sight. That day, I went to inspect the construction site, and I saw you wearing a white dress from afar. Hearing this, I felt crickets in my heart. Who goes to the construction site to sell food, and wears a white skirt? Is that an apron? I don't see it clearly, and I am embarrassed to say that it is love at first sight for me. Liar. Immersed in his own world, Andre Baker continued, you handed a bowl of rice to the old man, who was eating steamed buns in the corner, and I watched and walked towards you, and you smiled at me, and asked me if I wanted to buy rice. I felt like my heart was going to stop, and I asked if you had a boyfriend. You look me up and down, and ask if you look like a friend of mine. At this time, I realized that your face was 7 points similar to Florimel, and I nodded without thinking much about it, and you suddenly became very excited. It was only later that I realized that I had been mistaken from the beginning. After you moved here, you kept pestering me to ask me when I would sign the contract. I was in love for the first time. I didn't understand anything. I thought it was a love affair between lovers, so I asked the secretary to prepare one. I didn't know much about the content of it, and I signed it in a daze. When I realized that everything was wrong, I didn't dare to pierce it. I was afraid that you would not like me, and would leave without mercy. As he spoke, Andre Baker's eyes began to redden, and his eyes became moisturized, I dripping a god's milk, and I covered my face helplessly. The multiversion trend that I rehearsed in my mind last night has all turned into smoke at this moment. Things turned out much more than I expected. To be honest, I'm a little angry. 3 years, more than 1,000 days and nights, such a long time. Since Andre Baker had already found out about the misunderstanding between us and genuinely liked me, why didn't he confess it sooner? Not to mention, there was also a drama of Florimel's return to China, and I was afraid that I would become a spurned third party, and be kicked out in embarrassment. I watched Andre Baker sit upright in his chair, looking like an honest kid waiting for the teacher to review him. Angry, sour, soft-hearted, and a hidden hint of happiness. All kinds of emotions are intertwined in my heart. I suddenly remembered the rainy night, a year ago. At that time, due to the influence of the monsoon, heavy rain fell for more than half a month, and the drainage system completely failed, and the low-lying areas of the city were submerged. I suddenly had a high fever. Andre Baker was on a business trip, and I was the only one left in the villa. In a drowsy consciousness, the phone rang and rang. After a long time, in a daze, I opened my eyes and seemed to see Andre Baker. He was soaking wet and embarrassed, his mouth opening and closing in a hurry, but I couldn't hear anything. By the time I came back conscious, I was lying on a hospital bed with a hanging bottle in my hand. On the bed next to him lay Andre Baker, his face flushed. The nurse walked in and said, "You're finally awake. And your boyfriend was so bad when he sent you here yesterday?" I asked hoarsely. "What's wrong with him?" The nurse sighed. "He braved the heavy rain to carry you to the hospital, and he was about to be soaked in a buoy, but he took good care of you, and he also burned last night, and he hasn't subsided yet." I blinked my sour eyes and pushed back the tears that were about to flow. Since then, Andre Baker has been more than just a coin breaker in my heart. His image suddenly came to my mind. Will lie in bed, will play a little temper and don't want to go to work, regard coriander as an enemy, like spicy food, will condemn roadside stalls for unhygienic while skewering, and saying that it is really fragrant. It's also super good for me. He will drive a few kilometers to take me to a barbecue in the middle of the night when I'm hungry, and come back from work to bring me a gift. maybe a bouquet of flowers, maybe a bag of fragrant fried chestnuts with sugar. He will warm my feet in winter and fight mosquitoes in summer. After 3 years of getting along, slides swiped through my mind one by one. The heart has already come to fruition. I looked at him seriously, and deliberately asked, "What would you do if I said I didn't like you?" Andre Baker sniffed. I'm so bad. It's normal for you to dislike me. I'm cowardly, NAVE, poor-tempered, low EQ, and not good brain. I don't have a long mouth for 3 years. I don't deserve your liking. Loving someone is to hope her happy. I hope you can be happy. Woo woo. In the middle of his sentence, Andre Baker burst into tears, as loud as a boiling kettle. He sobbed and continued, "You have to keep your eyes open in the future. You must find someone who is good to you, and you can't look bad. You look so good. Woo woo woo." His eyes were red, soaked in tears like a transparent and bright gem. His thick and black eyelashes were clearly defined, and he was even more broken after being wet with tears, and he was aggrieved like a sad puppy abandoned by his owner. Men's tears, women's stimulants. I'll admit, I'm excited at this moment. There was even a dark thought in his head. How nice it would be if he kept crying. I pretended to be okay and coughed twice, and continued to ask, "Is everything you said before true?" He stammered, What? I curled my lips and chuckled. "Didn't you say that you are super good to your girlfriend, and spend all your money on her?" Andre Baker was stunned, and for a moment, as if he realized something, he asked in a trembling voice, "Sybil Walker, is that what I mean?" I smiled and nodded. "You said it. You are handsome and golden. You have abs, and you are good to your girlfriend. People like you have to be robbed. I don't want it to be a huge loss." Andre Baker rushed over and hugged me tightly. My head was buried in my neck socket, and after a while I felt wet. "Sybil Walker, I love you. I swear, I'll be super invincible to you in the future." I tapped him on the head and said, "It's not good for me. I'm going to shoot you with a pan." He hugged me and cried for a while, and then suddenly he muffled and said, "You've been so good to Flora all these days, and you've been so bad to me." Before the identity of the boyfriend and girlfriend was hot, they began to eat flying vinegar. I reluctantly patted the stupid dog on the back and said, "You're embarrassed to say, isn't this all you're doing? Weren't you quite smart and wise before? Can't you see that Flora Mall just likes my cooking?" The stupid dog snorted. "That's not going to work." After saying that, he hugged me a little tighter. After a long hot summer, today finally ushered in the slightest breeze, blowing away a little bit of heat. Sybil Walker and Andre Baker have lived happily ever after. Africa, a remote agricultural park. The secretary who was assigned abroad by the boss, who had a grudge, cried silently in the quilt, "It's really a sycophant on the horse's leg. Can you blame me? That's what is written in the novel." As he spoke, he reached out and struck a large black mosquito that had burrowed into the net. She took out her mobile phone and looked at the network signal with only 1 bar, and completely broke the defense. Woo woo woo. The network here is so bad. The novel update can't be buffered. I don't want to triple my salary anymore. I want to go home. The end.